Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman of SWIFT, Yawar Shah.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the 39th annual Sibos conference. This is the fourth time Sibos has traveled to Switzerland and the first time since 2002. And let me just say what an appropriate international city Geneva is for the SWIFT community to meet in. Did you know that Geneva has a population of just 200,000 people? But this is made up of people from over almost 200 countries, truly international. Now, temporarily, the SWIFT community may be adding to this international complexion of Geneva, as I'm also now pleased to announce yet again that we have a record of over 8,000 delegates at Sibos. And amongst all of you, we have representation from over 200 countries. Now, Switzerland, since we are here, I'd like to talk about another asset. And I would like to recognize that asset. And that asset is our deputy chairman of the board, Stefan Zimmermann. Stefan not only represents the Swiss community with great determination and leadership and balance, he has, with his true global citizenship, helped SWIFT mature and develop as your cooperative. And he's still doing that with energy and enthusiasm, and we really appreciate it. So Stefan, a big thank you to you. So now to the agenda. Let me begin by introducing our opening keynote, Thomas Jordan, chairman of the governing board of the Swiss National Bank. In addition, Thomas is a member of the board of directors of the Bank for International Settlements, you know that as the BIS, the steering committee of the Financial Stability Board, the FSB, and he is a governor of the International Monetary Fund. So, Thomas, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman Shaw, dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to open Sibos 2016 and welcome you all warmly to Geneva. Sibos is the annual gathering for financial market service providers. This sector, which is responsible for nothing less than the backbone of the financial system, is currently experiencing a surge of innovation. It is therefore a great honor for Switzerland to be hosting this important conference at this time of transformational change. Around the world, Switzerland is often seen as a haven of stability and continuity. The highly international Swiss financial sector benefits from the exceptional stability of our country's political and legal structures. At the same time, Switzerland manages to be innovative. It is regularly among the top performers in global innovation rankings. The Swiss financial industry plays an important role here. You will not find the crypto valley on any Swiss map, but a financial technology cluster going by this name has sprung up in the canton of Zug. The city of Zug has recently even launched a pilot project allowing certain public services to be paid for using a cryptocurrency. But even those of us who prefer more traditional payment methods can benefit from many innovations in Switzerland. For instance, cash can now be withdrawn from ATMs without a bank card, simply by using a smartphone. Like Switzerland, central banks are associated with stability and continuity. And yet, Since the financial crisis, they also have had to adopt ever more inventive policies to shield their respective economies from serious harm. The Swiss National Bank has likewise had to mobilize its innovative resources. We have developed and deployed new monetary policy instruments which have enabled us to carry out our mandate as fully as possible. When it comes to implementing monetary policy, financial market infrastructures are vital. In Switzerland, these infrastructures are run by SIX Group, and the Swiss National Bank is actively involved in shaping the strategic direction of certain functions. Without safe and efficient infrastructure, we would be unable to fulfill our mandate. This fact alone explains our keen interest in ensuring their smooth operations. But our interest goes beyond monetary policy implementation. The infrastructures also play a major role in enabling the Swiss National Bank to perform other duties, such as facilitating and securing the operation of cashless payment system and contributing to the stability of the financial system. As mentioned, the financial sector is experiencing a surge of innovation. The financial market infrastructures, and hence the central banks, stand to be affected by these changes. As this process unfolds, the SNB's task is to strike the right balance between maintaining stable conditions and promoting useful innovation. In this speech, I will outline why we are most likely to achieve safe and efficient outcomes if we can balance the interests of market participants, regulators, and central banks. The theme of this year's Sibos conference is transforming the landscape. New technologies are paving the way for new financial services. While there are certainly some interesting innovations in the offing, it is important to recognize that many of the financial industry's core functions will mainly or largely remain unchanged. The role of financial intermediaries is, first, to develop their clients, to help their clients fund new investments, and second, to offer them investment opportunities and asset protection strategies. The third role is to facilitate security safekeeping, and the fourth role is to execute payments on behalf of their clients. Customers have long required these basic services, and they will continue to need them in the future. In short, the economic functions of the financial industry has not changed. However, the technologies and the channels by which financial services are requested and delivered are changing. The digitalization of payment transactions, for instance, has helped to make cashless payments cheaper and simpler for customers, even if efficiency could still be further improved, especially where cross-border payments are concerned. The advent of dematerialized securities years ago is another example of innovation within the financial industry. This change greatly increased the efficiency of securities settlement and safekeeping. The digital transformation has also added value in another way. It has enabled bank customers to execute transactions with greater temporal flexibility and geographical independence. These days, traditional bank counters have morphed into apps that live on our smartphones. Such useful innovations have the potential to improve aggregate economic welfare. The challenge for regulators and central bank is to make sure they fully understand these effects and side effects of these new mechanisms at an early stage. The same goes for innovations affecting financial market infrastructures, especially those that are systemically important. Such assessments of new technologies are based on a set of internationally accepted guidelines called Principles for Financial Market Infrastructures. These principles define the criteria that infrastructure must meet, thereby setting standards for innovation in this field. Central banks and regulators have a duty to pass legislation guaranteeing the safety of financial market infrastructure by protecting their stability, resilience, and availability, irrespective of technological change. But they must also take on board the efficiency goals of infrastructure providers and their participants. Regulatory adjustment may be needed to catalyze the positive effects of certain innovations. Until very recently, safety and efficiency were considered to be a function of centralization. This trend is reflected in the evolution of central securities depositories and in the emergence of cashless payment transactions. In Switzerland, centralized clearinghouses in the 1940s and centralized data processing in the 1970s were waypoints on a journey of convergence. This development culminated in the creation of the centralized Swiss interbank clearing payment system, the SIC, in 1987. Another, more recent example is the settlement of OTC derivatives via central counterparties. The centralization process and the related economies of scale both reduced costs and improved safety. However, with the arrival of the latest technologies, these third-party clearing and settlement services are increasingly seen as unnecessary cost factors. The keywords here are distributed ledgers and blockchain. The underlying technology promises first and foremost to reduce cost. For instance, such systems would render the reconciliation of transaction and balance data between banks and the third-party system obsolete. The paradigm seems to have been turned on its head. Decentralization, not centralization, now appears to promise the greatest efficiency gains. I do not, however, believe that decentralization will become the new normal in all financial market functions and infrastructures. Many existing financial market infrastructures are already highly competitive, and barriers to entry for new technology are correspondingly high. The conventional centralized model they are built on is already low cost and meets high safety standards, and improvements are being made all the time. Distributed ledger technology, meanwhile, has yet to prove it can outperform the existing setup with respect to safety and efficiency. Having said this, there may be some scope for deploying distributed ledger in certain complex financial market functions or infrastructures. The settlement and safekeeping of securities is one example. In the end, we may well see conventional and new technologies coexisting or blending. Staying with the security example, it is conceivable that we will see a hybrid scenario. This could entail security-specific information being settled via a distributed ledger, while the payment leg could continue to be affected via traditional centralized payment system. Such new technology is highly relevant for central banks, especially in the context of the ongoing debate about central bank money potentially being issued via distributed ledger. The idea raises a host of central bank-specific questions that will need to be examined in more detail. The Swiss National Bank is following and analyzing developments in this arena closely and is actively involved in discussions with market participants, regulators, and other central banks. Amid all these longer-term visions, we should be careful not to overlook changes that are just around the corner, or indeed have already been introduced. So let me return to the present and talk about developments in cashless payment transactions that are already having a tangible effect on central banks around the world. For obvious reasons, my remarks will be based on the situation in Switzerland. As I've already mentioned, one of the Swiss National Bank's mandates is to facilitate and secure the operation of cashless payment systems. One of the key ways in which we perform this duty is through our strategic guidance of the SIG payments system. This includes approving the technical changes to the system and the rules of conduct for system participants, fixing operation hours and rates, and deciding who is granted access to the SIG system. At the same time, the SIG system is operated not by us, but by SIG's interbank clearing. System participants are involved in the decision-making process and therefore play a direct part. This configuration makes SIG a market solution. Another feature is that the SIG system is used to settle not only interbank payments, but also a large proportion of retail payments. By virtue of its role in SIG, the SNB has a substantial influence on retail payments in Swiss franc and is, in turn, also impacted by dynamic forces at work in this area. The SIG system takes account of such forces and sets the stage for cashless payments innovations, which ultimately benefits customers. This is reflected in the launch of the fourth generation of the SIG system in April of this year. SIG now supports ISO 20022, the emerging standard in payment messaging. Thanks to the IT architecture of the new SIG system, innovative services can now be maintained and developed more flexibly and more cost-effectively than in the past. Furthermore, SIG's operating hours are due to be changed next year. This will extend the window in which customers can submit payments with same-day value date. The possibility of adjusting the regulatory framework that I've touched earlier is also very topical in Switzerland at the moment. Specifically, this concerns the issue of lowering barriers to market entry for fintech companies. FINMA, the Swiss Financial Market Supervisory Authority, supports the introduction of a new licensing category for fintech companies. New FINMA-regulated participants establishing themselves in retail payments could also seek access to the SIG system in the future. As these examples show, the SIG system is moving with the times. SIG is systemically important and critical to the fulfillment of our mandate. We therefore support innovations which will improve its efficiency without compromising its safety. Ladies and gentlemen, financial technology is evolving rapidly and calling many existing structures into question. Despite this, it is important to bear in mind that the fundamental needs of companies and households that are met by financial services remain largely unchanged. The usefulness and the success of new technologies will hinge on whether they can meet these basic needs more cheaply, more securely, and in a more customer-friendly manner than existing technologies and solutions. The Swiss National Bank is neutral vis-à-vis the technologies underpinning financial market infrastructures. It assesses innovations in terms of their implications for the fulfillment of its mandate. Our focus is on safety and efficiency, and we analyze the effects and the side effects of innovations closely through this lens. For this analysis, dialogue between market participants, regulators, and central banks is essential. This is especially true in view of current technological changes, which makes walking the line between stability and innovations particularly challenging. This exchange of views with practitioners helps us to correctly assess the uses and the risks of new technologies. Such discussions are critical if we are to exploit the technologies of the futures at the right time and under the right conditions. I would therefore like to extend my sincere thanks to the organizers of the Sibos event for these excellent opportunities to share ideas. As home to many international organizations, Geneva is an ideal location for this dialogue. We are certain to find fertile ground here. I wish you all a successful conference with many enlightening discussions. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Thank you.
Thomas, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, in the past, I've begun these conferences by updating you about what has been going on with SWIFT overall. Today will be a little different. I want to get straight to the point, to the main issue occupying us all at SWIFT: cyber security. Our community is under attack. We need to address this together. In recent incidents, attackers have identified and exploited vulnerabilities in customers' local security. This enabled them to compromise customers' local environments and input fraudulent messages that were carried over the SWIFT network. This is an inflection point for SWIFT and our community. Since SWIFT's inception, the security of the network has been paramount, and we have not let you down. As all of you know, and as management reaffirmed with the board this Saturday, SWIFT's core network and messaging services have not been compromised. And Gottfried will discuss this in more detail shortly. But the fact that SWIFT has not been compromised gives little comfort to a bank-owned cooperative, because it is clear that in several cases, the underlying security of some banks have been compromised. For the past 40 years, SWIFT's mission has been to protect the core and to help banks protect their own environments by offering tools and guidance. We've heard from all of you that bank environments and the credential management there is not just related to SWIFT. Instead, these bank environments can cover multiple areas of funds transfer and access to payment and security settlement systems. But the cybersecurity landscape is changing. Cyber criminals are well organized, well funded, and extremely sophisticated, and getting smarter. And as expected, they have evolved. They used to go after e-banking retail applications of customers. Now they're attacking banks and going after SWIFT credentials from those banks. So in order to assist our customers address this threat, SWIFT has launched the Customer Security Program. And this program will be a major topic at Sibos. The board has dedicated significant funding and attention to make this program a success and help banks protect themselves. SWIFT has the financial strength and the ability to do this, all the while investing in the core. Also, the board reprioritized some of SWIFT's commercial initiatives so that the executives can focus on the program and make it a success for you all. In fact, I am pleased to announce that this past weekend, the SWIFT board unanimously endorsed the next stage of the customer security program. Specifically, the board approved the security objectives and principles, as well as those controls that will be mandatory for your environments. So those of you who know me, I talk in threes. 3 objectives, 8 principles, 27 controls. The board also approved the mechanisms of assurance to ensure transparency for local central banks, counterparties, and correspondents. Perhaps, for example, through a KYC registry. Now, these must be rigorously vetted, including specifics and timelines with the community over the coming quarter. You will hear a lot more about this week. But let me emphasize, the security experts tell us that this threat is going to get worse. This rapidly evolving threat is a game changer. SWIFT's board and management will continue to enhance the resiliency and security of SWIFT's core, while expanding its remit to help the banks protect themselves. Now, so far, the industry has discussed this in the context of payments flow. But I do know that the securities clearing and settlement industry is also gearing up to protect those large value transfers as well. So let me expand this topic and talk a little bit more about the correspondent banks, custodians, and clearing agents' implications. You've all stepped up because you're not only concerned about your own institutions, but about protecting your customers. SWIFT is an enablement agent for the world's correspondent banking and securities and settlement services businesses. But before I transition to the implications of these franchises, permit me to spend a few minutes on a very, very basic topic that is at the heart of SWIFT's core franchise and business, and that is called the Relationship Management Application, or RMA. Okay, so now maybe some of you are asking, why are we talking about the RMA at the Sibos Plenary? Has the chairman gone back to his native roots? Well, if I were going back to my native roots, I'd be talking to you about cricket, not RMA. But I have some questions for you all. So, how many of you know what the RMA is? Let me have a show of hands, please. Good. A large number. Okay. And what percentage of all RMA customers exchange keys bilaterally? Now let's start with, how many of you think it's 75%? Show of hands. 50. Okay. 25. 5. Okay. The answer is 2.5%. And you know, according to SWIFT estimates, only half of the 2.5% have actually engaged in a transaction the last 2 years. So in a way, SWIFT is like Facebook. You have to friend each other to move large value payments and securities. Using the RMA, we all choose who we will do business with over the SWIFT network. Equally, once you cease doing business with an RMA counterpart, you can terminate the RMA relationship. You should. So SWIFT is going to spend a lot of time and effort improving the sophistication of the RMA tools. But the basics already exist, but they're sadly underutilized. Now, with your permission, I'd like to come back to the inflection point we are facing because, of course, cybersecurity is not the only issue affecting our community. I believe the correspondent banking and securities clearing and settlement businesses are going through a period of profound change. So right now, I'm going to talk about 3 challenges facing our industry. One, increasing costs due to compliance requirements. KYC, sanctions, and AML regulation have increased the cost of business for the entire sector while improving effectiveness, leading to material de-risking. Swift's response has been to help with tools like our KYC registry and AML analytics. These provide insight for our community and reduce the cost of compliance. Secondly, technological innovation, governance changes, and increasingly public litigation procedures are increasingly shifting the existing legislative foundation of the payments and securities industries. If this was a US audience, I'd be talking about UCC 4A, similar things like that. Defining the rules and liabilities in this new world of cyber and fraud is going to be critical. Finally, the impact of the cyber attacks on banks and other criminal activity this year will be felt across multiple areas. The second line of defense across fraud, cyber, op risk, and AML will have to work closely together to address this challenge. Swift's customer security program will also contribute to these industry changes, given its size and scope onto the 11,000 participants. But colleagues, now is not the time to retreat and hunker down. As an industry, we have to engage with even more with each other. It's not just talking about interaction within payments, within securities, or within the financial crime space. We also need engagement across these functions and also with our colleagues from fraud, legal, operations, and cyber disciplines. That is why I am so pleased to welcome the CISO community to Sibos this year for the first time. So you'll remember, some years ago, we started to get interest from the financial crime compliance leads. Now, financial crime compliance has evolved to a full forum with products and services that the Swift community actively uses. I expect that the CISO engagement along with the bankers will see a similar, but perhaps even more dramatic evolution. And of course, we also recognize the presence of the global transaction banking leaders at Sibos. We value their insight, their leadership, and their fundamental views that are so vital to this industry. While this is all going on, Swift continues to focus on meeting its 2020 commitment to the community, and it continues to perform. Your cooperative's 2016 operating performance has been impeccable. Year to date, Swift delivered 100% availability for SwiftNet and 99.999 for Fin, while Swift's messaging volumes continue to increase. So Swift keeps delivering. I want to explicitly thank Gottfried for his dedication and leadership, and to thank each and every one of the Swift management team for their expertise and diligence. And a special expression of gratitude to the Swift staff for their hard work and devotion to the community. I want to thank the Swift board for their governance, for meeting monthly during this very difficult time, and for the Chairs Committee for their leadership, for meeting every other week, and for overseeing and reviewing the customer security program. Most importantly, I want to thank the board for diligently representing the interests of the whole community as they set Swift's priorities. They also ensure that Swift remains neutral while balancing both the large and small banks' interests in various geographies and functions around the world. And with respect to the various functions and geographies, I want to extend my thanks and gratitude to the chairs of the 156 national member groups that met all day yesterday and provided guidance to SWIFT. You are the heart and soul of this cooperative, and we are here to serve you. Dear colleagues, these are challenging times. You have commitment from SWIFT's board. You have commitment from SWIFT's management. And you have commitment from me. As your elected chair and shareholder representative, I work for you. We have a lot to discuss and accomplish here. Thank you. And now I'd like to hand over to Gottfried.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Yawar. Like you, I will start with the topic of security. And indeed, the Bangladesh events have brought the threat of cyber right to the doorstep of our industry. And we continue to see new cases where fraudsters penetrate bank environments, compromise payment credentials, use that to send fraudulent payments that ultimately flow over our network. So how did we get here? Well, I think it is no coincidence that we're seeing this threat of cyber emerge in our industry just as we're innovating like never before. I think the two are linked. Over the past years, we have greatly enhanced customer experiences, improved STP, improved processing efficiencies by linking systems to each other and to the internet. And I've just learned that here in Switzerland, your mobile is linked to the ATM. And this trend will continue. We may well be heading to the Internet of Things, where your refrigerator will have access to your bank account. Your car may be linked to your insurance company. So clearly, this poses a real challenge, because at the same time, this linking of everything to everything has created a perfect breeding ground for cyber. Cyber fraud, cyber warfare, cyber espionage. Now, taking a step back, I would argue that mankind has seen this movie before. Not with computer worms and computer viruses, but with real parasites, real diseases, and real viruses. Thousands of years ago, mankind started to move and live into cities like this one here. This is Babylon. 4,000 years ago, 200,000 people, just learned that's the population of current Geneva, 200,000 people were living in this city. It's close to Baghdad, so if you're in the neighborhood in Iraq, you can visit the ruins. But of course, as humans started to live together in great amounts, that created the perfect breeding ground for diseases, with the catastrophes that we all are aware of. Now, how did mankind deal with the challenge? Well, what they did not do is move back, abandon the cities, and move back into living in caves. No, they turned an existential threat into a manageable nuisance by a combination of basic hygiene, sanitation, the famous Roman aqueducts, and innovations like vaccines, medicines, and even big data. Here's my favorite. It's in the London cholera epidemic in the 1850s. John Snow made the first statistical map. He plotted the number of cholera cases on a map of London. You see little red bar charts representing the number of cases. And he correctly linked them to a single contaminated well on Broad Street here, long before Pasteur linked the disease to actual bacteria, etc. So big data, innovation, etc. And I think there's a lesson here. We too, as an industry, can turn this existential threat into a manageable nuisance, not by moving out of the cities, but by innovation, by really focusing our efforts on going forward. And that will require industry actions along three fronts. And I'll borrow Yawar's, I never know, these three, right? These three. First, you, us. The first thing and the most important thing that all of us need to do is secure our own environment. And a lot of that boils down to basic hygiene. multi-factor authentication, securing your credentials, antivirus, firewalls, latest updates, security patches, and latest updates to operating software. Basic hygiene. But, like medical hygiene, this is both easy and hard. My medical friends tell me that there's clear evidence that if all surgeons were to wash their hands for a full 2 minutes before an operation, we could cut in half the number of deadly hospital infections, which are a real problem, especially with resistance to penicillin. Cut it in half. And yet, the majority of surgeons do not comply with that. These are doctors, they know the facts, real people are dying, and still they do not comply. So we'll need a little pressure for that compliance. So for that, we are rolling out a number of objectives, principles, and around 30 controls that banks should comply with to secure their environment. And to help them along, we'll ask them for a self-attestation against these controls, make that transparent, and back that up with samples where we'll ask banks to back that up with internal and external audits. And the results of this self-attestation will be made available to the local regulator, but also to their counterparties that they do business with, so that you, as a correspondent, can check whether your counterparty has washed his hands for dinner, so to speak. The second thing is about you and your counterpart. So one is about you, the other one is about your counterparties. Hygiene, like medical hygiene, hygiene is necessary but not sufficient. You or your counterparty may still get breached. In case you get breached, we need additional controls, and for that we rolled out the daily payment report, metrics on risk and traffic that allow you to spot fraudulent payments and stop them. And your counterparty may get breached, so you need to be prepared for incoming traffic being compromised as well. That's where the famous relationship management application comes in, that's where additional controls come in, and that's where the transparency to your counterparty comes in that I talked about. And the third angle to this, your counterpart, the third angle is our community as a whole. Payments and financial transactions is a truly global business and a global ecosystem. So what has happened to one institution in one geography may well happen to another on the other side of the globe. And that's why we think it's important to share and prepare. Share the details if you've been breached and compromised, so that we can take those, we can make it available to others on an anonymous basis, indications of compromise, modus operandi, and then others need to prepare for similar attacks by taking that information and acting upon it. So, by doing those three things, we think it can be done. And to show you that this is not just vaporware and PowerPoints, but real and tangible, let me share the details of a few recent cases with you. A few months ago, over the summer, I get a call. One of our banks had been alerted by their clearing correspondent that there was something fishy with their transactions. And we worked in real time with that bank, with their clearing correspondent, to retrieve messages, compare them, and indeed we found that the bank had been compromised and that payment reports had been altered as per the modus operandi. Next day, I get another call. The clearing correspondent had found that the ultimate beneficiary of these fraudulent transactions, a mule account, featured in transactions of yet another bank. We contacted that bank, and that bank too had been compromised, and fortunately it had already been alerted by the bank of the ultimate beneficiary, who had had AML concerns over that final account. So in those cases, fortunately, we were able to prevent, or the industry was able to prevent any money from being lost. A little while later, a few weeks later, another case. This was a bank that had the latest antivirus and had updated the latest security patch on our software. And in that case, alerts from the antivirus and from that latest security patch triggered alerts that prevented further fraud happening there as well. So in all of those cases, no money was lost, thanks to a combination of real global cooperation, alertness. In the first case, it was a cooperation between the two breached banks, the clearing bank, the bank of the ultimate beneficiary, all on 4 different continents, by the way, and ourselves, that really made this work. Now, that does not mean that the problem is solved. Far from it. There are other cases where we've seen where the attacks are successful, and we expect this to continue and get more sophisticated. So clearly, we need to put our minds to this. We will not stop. We will continue with that program, and I think we as a whole industry will have to work on this. We're also, by the way, investing in our own security. As Yawar said, to date, we have not been breached as far as we're aware, and I always add the as far as we are aware, because I truly believe that in cyber, only the paranoid survive. One thing we're not doing is turning back the clock on innovation. Like the early city dwellers, we are not going to move back and live in caves and disconnect all the systems. We have to move forward. Fintech is here to stay. Fintech is transforming the financial landscape and posing a real challenge and opportunity to us all. First of all, in cyber itself, there are many new technologies that we can use. Artificial intelligence for pattern recognition, biometrics, remote endpoint detection. Those are just some examples of all the new technologies that are available to really combat cyber fraud. But beyond that, fintech, as said, continues to reshape the digitization of financial services globally. I mean, look at Alipay and Tencent in China. This is a global phenomenon where fintech is transforming the industry, offering better services to customers. And fintech will eat the industry's lunch unless we adapt and innovate ourselves and continue at that very high pace of innovation. And that's why we, Swift, continue to support our banks with new innovative services. I can mention Australia, where the rollout of the real-time payments platform is now in full swing. That will allow the Australian banks to offer real-time payments to their customers, as well as a host of new services on top of that. Now, you'll not be surprised that we're saving the biggest efforts for our passion, transaction banking, and in particular, global correspondent banking. Now, you might say, yeah, dream on. We don't need it anymore. We've got new technologies. Blockchain and distributed ledger will make that obsolete. People tell me it has the transformative, disruptive power of the internet. And I like that analogy, because let's look at the internet. In the early 90s, the prediction, or the late 90s even, the prediction was that the internet was going to put banks out of business. That did not happen. Why? Because banks adapted and adopted the technology to offer better services to their customer. If you look at your banking experience today, it's radically different from 20 years ago, largely enabled by internet and new services, apps on your mobile, access to your ATM, etc. And the internet has not put Swift out of business. We have taken key elements of the internet, TCP/IP, PKI signatures, all of that, and put it at the heart of SwiftNet, which is now the platform that's enabling a lot of the innovations we're rolling out. So we truly believe correspondent banking is a great asset for the industry. It has unique reach, and by the way, to Yawar's point, 1% of all the potential connections on our network, that's still 1 million active bilateral relationships where people have exchanged RMA and are sending active traffic. 1 million friendships, so to speak, on the Facebook of financial services is impressive. It has established rules and market practices that we all know how it works. It has deep liquidity. It's a great asset. And for us, the real challenge is to help transform that and take it into the next century. And we're doing that. We're doing that with GPI, the Global Payments Initiative, right here at Sibos, where we're now in active pilot mode. About 80 banks have signed up for it. Why do they do that? Because it allows them to offer better services to their customers and greatly enhance the correspondent banking experience. Greater speed, traceability, and transparency. And we're going to roll out more services. Who knows? Some of them may be enabled by that same blockchain. We're certainly looking at that as an underlying technology, as well as other technologies to keep enhancing that service. And if you see somebody walking around at Sibos with one of these, ask them for a demonstration of what the future might look like. It's impressive. We're doing that. We're also doing financial crime compliance. We now have over 500 customers on the sanction screening service. We have close to 3,000 customers on the KYC database, both much higher number than we expected. And we're rolling out new services, sanctions testing, name screening, payments quality data enhancement, the FATF 16 rule, compliance analytics. So all of that continues as well. So the bigger picture for me is 3 big initiatives: security, financial crime compliance, global payments initiatives, all doubling down on transaction banking and correspondent banking to take it well into the 21st century. And that takes me to Sibos. As you expect, we have taken all of these themes and made a program that allows you to debate them all. We have this year even made the program 24/7. We have added a big issue debate at 3 a.m. the next morning between 2 US presidential candidates, so you really can stay at Sibos 24/7. No, all kidding aside, a great program with a lot of security themes in it. I would like to draw your attention to one thing in particular, InnoTribe, now in its 8th year. This year, like in the rest of Sibos, we've really made sure that cyber and security is presented there as well. We have a lot of startups and technologies focusing purely on security and cyber prevention. It's a great show, and from what I've seen so far, it truly is a best ever after 8 years of being in an on-ramp. So with that, I would say, welcome to Geneva, and have a great Sibos.